Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Michael Regina. I'm the author and illustrator of the all-ages horror graphic novel The Sleepover. The perfect read, I think, if you enjoy graphic novels for this spooky season of the year. And here to do another video interview with a creator that I really admire. This is Trevor Henderson, creator of characters like Sirenhead and Cartoon Cat and Longhorse and just a whole bunch of stuff that got really popular and my kids adore, and so do I. But this month, during spooky season, I thought this would be a great interview because Trevor wrote his first book. It's called Scarewaves, and it came out last week on October 3rd. Yes, October 3rd. And I wanted to get together with him and talk about his creative process, how he came up with this story, and the lessons he learned about making his first book. And this is actually part one of our interview, and I will be releasing the next one very soon. If you'd like to see that interview, be sure to like and subscribe so you can be notified when that interview comes out. But without further ado, let's jump into part one of my interview with Trevor Henderson, the creator of Scarewaves, and learn about this book. I am hanging out with Trevor Henderson, one of the biggest horror artists I know on the internet, talking about art and creating. And I specifically want to talk a lot about creating your book that is coming out next month, Scarewaves, right?
Yeah.
Was it supposed to come out this month and it got moved?
No,
or has it always been October?
It's always been October 3rd. Yeah,
Okay.
which I discovered from like the Amazon listing. I didn't hear from anybody. It's just like, oh, I guess it's coming out the 3rd, but I think it's always been 3rd from they've always aimed for an October release for obvious reasons.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I had a similar experience when my book came out. I was like, oh, I guess I found out through like an Amazon listing too.
Yeah,
And I was like, oh,
yeah.
I guess today.
They're a little tight-mouthed about certain details, I'm finding.
Right. And yeah, I was wondering about that too, because we've had so many COVID related shipping issues. Like mine was supposed to come out in early October too, and then it bumped back a month and we missed Halloween. It was such a bummer. Like that was our push. But
yeah, that sucks. I'm sorry. Yeah,
it's all good. But I think it's done okay.
Yeah, my partner Jen Woodall is a comic artist, and she had her big book, Space Trash, got delayed because of the some sort of paper shortage that also popped up around the same time, I think.
Right. Yeah, it's weird stuff.
It's a bummer.
Yes, it is a bummer. But well, quick, I just wanted to give you a chance to intro yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and we'll get into talking about it specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Trevor Henderson. I'm an illustrator and creature concept artist and writer who specializes in horror and monsters and ghosts and all that good fun stuff. And I guess I'm most known for creating a bunch of monsters that kind of became weirdly super popular on the internet, like Sirenhead and Cartoon Cat and Longhorse and a few others, that are mostly just, they live in these like, there's no real narrative for them yet. They live completely online through photos that people send me through social media, where I paint them in and kind of try and make them look as naturally occurring in the environment of the photo as possible, because of like light and tone and shadow and all that fun stuff. And yeah, weird fan base, especially with really young kids. Partly, I think that's because of their popularity on YouTube. Has kind of cropped up around these characters, and it's been really weird.
That was actually going to be like my first, or one of the questions I want to ask, and since you bring it up, I'll just dive right into it. Like, is it? I don't think of your work as like aimed towards younger, an audience or anything, but it definitely has caught on like that way. Like, I think my first time I saw anything you made, it was a Instagram reel of Sirenhead, like above a neighborhood or something, and I was like, whoa, that's creepy, And I showed it to my son, and he was just like, oh yeah, that's Sirenhead, and I'm like, this is like 3 years ago, and he's like 6.
Yeah, that happened. That was one of the two things that kind of made Sirenhead weirdly go viral, was that exact video. Because I made the character at a time when I was working retail, and I would come home and just want to do something art, want to produce, like draw some monsters, but just I was really tired. So I started drawing characters into pre-existing photos as like an exercise in terms of matching the environment and trying to like make it look natural, and also just like not having to do a whole painted piece after, you know, working a full shift on a weekday and having to work the next day. And yeah, I did Sirenhead as just one of like many. And then it wasn't until like 2 years after I first drew Sirenhead that it blew up, like a week after my birthday in April of, I think, 2020. And part of it was that video went viral on TikTok with him like Godzilla sized, like lurking over a city for some reason. And at the same time, a mutual on Twitter had made this like really short little game demo that featured Sirenhead, and that got reviewed or like played by a bunch of big YouTube people like Markiplier. And so at the same time, those two things dropped like the same day or more or less, and all of a sudden Sirenhead blew up. But yeah, I've never aimed specifically, aside from Scarewaves a little bit, I've never aimed for a younger audience, but kids just really respond to monsters and scary stuff. And I do really think that kids can tell when you're doing something with kids in mind, like especially when it's horror stuff. Like it's hard not to do something with kids in mind and make them not feel talked down to or like condescended to in certain ways, like neutering the scary a little bit. So I just don't do that. I just try and make it as scary as possible, and kids seem to really like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's actually like my exact same philosophy when it comes to making kid stuff. Is I'm like, I knew what I wanted when I was a kid. Like I wanted kids,
same.
but I if I was watching something as a kid, but if I was watching something scary, I wanted it to be scary. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you know, especially in kids' narratives, I think I've always said that I think it's really important to have stakes and real danger and, you know, consequences, because otherwise everything, you know, feels pointless or weightless or just there's no point, especially in like horror. So it's a bit of a tightrope to walk where I don't want to like scar children for life with stuff that's too scary, but you know, you also don't want to have it be not scary at all, I guess.
Yeah, it's like I tried to make the kids that when you see the kids, I wanted it to feel like a kid's book, right? Like I want the kids to feel kid-like. I want them to behave like kids. But then, like when the monster shows up, it's like that thing better look like it could take you out. you know?
Exactly.
And, and it's been fun watching kids react that way, because every once in a while I'll get like a response from an adult that's like, "This is too scary," you know, too scary. And
I'm anticipating that.
I definitely wanted to ask you some questions about that within Scarewaves, because I was like, dang, I could see that coming up. But because there's some legit scary stuff in there. But it is such a weird like line to like what's the word, needle to thread, I guess, like that where you go too far with kids audiences. But for some reason, like your stuff, like it gives me confidence that I'm not off the mark, that your work is like so well loved by children, and I'm like, okay, I'm not out to lunch here. You know?
No, I was worried a little bit writing some chapters of the book that they'd be like, you know, Scholastic would ask me to tone it down a little bit, but I think that you know, they came to me with this book project specifically because the stuff that I was doing without kids in mind, just because I thought it was cool or scary or weird, just because I wanted to see it out in the world, and because it responded so well and like naturally just drummed up this huge kids base. That's what they wanted in the book, which is what I did, which is just the exact same sort of thing I've been doing online, just trying to, you know, make monsters that were legitimately frightening. So thankfully they were very good about that, and they didn't ask me to walk back anything. Which
awesome.
I was sure they would, but no.
I was surprised that I didn't get more of that too, because there's a few scenes like, ooh, I could get that could get kind of bumped up.
I think there's like different guidelines, like thinking on it, that, you know, there's some scary stuff throughout Scarewaves, I hope, but it's all either implied and the monsters are the source of the scare. Like kids get got in Scarewaves, but like there's no violence on screen, because I've never gone that way in terms of any of my horror art. Like I've never gone through like the kind of gorier side of horror, I guess. I naturally avoid that. So it's just an extension to not have that really ever happen in the book. And also I find that whenever someone's doing something scary for kids and they can't show any violence or death, they have to kind of get weirder with it. And it ends up being like way more frightening for me personally than if they just had a character get killed off. So I try to do the same thing with a certain moment in Scarewaves as well.
That makes a ton of sense. Your work is like, I would mostly, it's like really unsettling.
Thank you. Yes. You know? Yeah. Thank you. I try for that.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it like so creepy. But to your point, like I've never had like my oldest son, or I'm sorry, my youngest child, only son, come to me and be like, I'm too scared by this. I think he really responds to that. I hadn't put that really fully together with your work, but yeah, I've never really seen it be what I would call gory or over the top. It's just sort of very unnerving.
Yeah.
And that I think helps kids feel scared, but in a safe way.
Yeah. Well, that's great. You know? That's exactly what I want to happen. Yeah, and you know, I'm you won't find a bigger fan of slasher movies and all that stuff. I grew up on all that, like practical effects and all that. It's just not something that has been ever in my creative output. I don't find it as scary. It's like a different headspace for me completely.
Yeah, it's my friend Josh Ulrich is another comic book artist, makes some horror stuff too. And we were talking about this past weekend about like how we won't mind watching horror that is very sort of bleak and dark, but when it comes to making our own, we're like, no, I don't want to be depressed for 2 years. No thanks.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I could definitely see that getting explored, like that very like 70s like Euro horror, like bleak tone, like nihilistic tone, or like French extremity, like horror films can be really, really bleak. Like I love that stuff, but like it's not anything I would ever even attempt to go near for even YA or middle grade. It's very that's not something I want to do.
I agree. I don't think I could do it. I like this sort of like, and I think this came across in Scarewaves, and I really saw it, especially without being spoilery towards the end, like that the scares eventually turn almost more to adventure.
Yeah, and, I think you got it.
Yeah, I think so too. And so it made for really more exciting, you know, again, not to be too spoiler on it, but it gave me a very exciting sort of like adventurous tone to the ending while still having scarier elements. And where like you did that nice shift from like unsettling to adventure.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean the first like half of the book is almost, I've been describing it as an almost anthology kind of feel, like different characters, different story, different monsters, and then at the midpoint it comes together and becomes sort of hopefully becomes one narrative, and that shift is, you know, a natural thing that I think has to happen at that point. I wanted to be like the Monster Squad or the Goonies, but with kind of like internet monsters, like what you might see through creepypastas, and kind of updated a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think you nailed that. So
thank you.
Were you? So I know you've done a lot of art. Was this like the first time you tried really cracking a book like yourself, or had you done a lot in the past and we just haven't seen it?
Nothing. Honestly, I've done. You know, when I do the art, especially the photo-based like monster art, I try and do a little piece of flash fiction just like as an exercise to kind of give it the barest amount of like context. So my hope is that if there's an especially effective piece, like an image that resonates, it'll have a little bit of background text. And between those two things, whoever's viewing the image and the text can craft their own narrative that'll be better than anything I could have put together if I'd sat down and did a whole, you know, the whole short story about it or whatever. I wanted to get the experience of seeing like the height of a good short story or a moment in a found footage horror movie, like just in an image and text. So I've done a lot of that, but I've not done any big narrative, any real narrative stuff with characters and until Scarewaves. So it was definitely a learning experience. But I am excited to do more. There is going to be a second book in the series for sure.
Oh yeah,
awesome. And hopefully more.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah, I see that opportunity. I'm glad that you're getting to do more. It you know, I probably somewhat similarly. I think, you know, I grew up drawing, wanting to be an artist, wanting to be a comic book artist specifically. And then eventually, it was M. Night Shyamalan. I got the bug on him in my college years, and I was like, wait a minute, I can write and tell scary stories. Like something about seeing signs in the movie theater sort of sent me off in another trajectory altogether. Like
that's a good one for that, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And also, I was going to recommend to you No One Will Save You. Just came out.
Oh yeah, I saw that day before yesterday. Actually, yeah, I was really looking for that. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, we might have to talk about that one later because I enjoyed it as well. But I also had a lot of thoughts at the end. I was like, there's some things to think about here.
Definitely,
but you know, a shift sort of happened in my 20s where it was like I felt like I needed to learn to be a good writer if I was ever going to be any good at this. I was like sort of looking at it going, I know I feel like I could get better as an artist. I know what it takes to become a good artist. Like if I really, really, really wanted to get better at it, I know what it took. But like as a writer, it was like I have no idea what I'm doing here. You know, and sort of there's been a shift in maybe in my last 15 years or more. My focus was like become a good writer. Figure try to advance in the art as much as I can, and it's a challenge. And so I'm just wondering, like, what has been that big challenge for you while writing that? Did you find it really challenging to start thinking like a writer overall instead of just sort of these single images and, like you said, flash fiction?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they, when Scholastic came to me with this project, they already were drawing on a lot of the strengths they saw through the art and obviously the touchstones in genre that I really respond to. Like I love, kids versus monster stuff that's like actually scary and cool. So it was kind of like geared specifically with me in mind. So it was definitely like I was in an advantage there where it was a subject and a genre, a subgenre that I was really well versed in. But in terms of actually sitting down and writing, it was definitely a learning experience. And, it was the very thoroughly plotted out to try and make that to facilitate that as best as possible. But it was still my first narrative. And I feel like I'm in that position that you were in your 20s now, where I'm at the start of that and I really want to get better at, I feel like a lot of people will have a kind of reverse of my situation where they will write all these narratives and stories and then the characters will become popular from that. Whereas I've just made the characters and they become really popular, but they don't have a home. There's like no narrative really externally. Like some of them I have thoughts for sure and stories I want to tell with them. Like I have a whole Sirenhead story thought out that I really want to sit down and write. So it has a narrative to live in, I guess. But yeah, no, I'm definitely at the start of that. And I definitely want to write more once my plate's a little bit clearer in terms of the art thing. I would love ideally to be doing both a little bit more regularly.
Yeah. Are you gosh, I'm going to ask you this and I might cut it in earlier, but tell us about Scarewaves. We haven't even we're just launching and talking about it. Yeah, tell us about Scarewaves so people who are watching know what the heck this book is we're talking about.
So Scarewaves is a Scholastic middle grade book. I think the audience is 9 or 10 to 12, 13 range, but I like to think that there's something to enjoy for if you like my art and stuff online. I just made sure to pack it as full of monsters as possible so that that's what I'm known for. You're going to get that for sure, even if nothing else really works. Hopefully it does work, but if it doesn't, there's still monsters. But it's a book about a small town called Beacon Point in the 90s, ambiguously in the 90s, and a variety of kids who have, some have lived in the town for a while, and some are just, moving there from all walks of life, a bunch of different kids. And the first half of the book is kind of talking about how kids are going missing in this town and getting taken by various creatures and monsters and entities. And it's broken up with transcripts from a local radio station, and the DJ who runs a show on the local radio station named Alan Graves, who runs a show kind of about the ominous and scary history of the town and all these weird instances that have plagued it that everyone kind of turns a blind eye to. And most of the adults just don't care and don't try and think about it. But the kids, are who live there are very well aware. And it's about these kids eventually like coming together after surviving encounters, the ones that do survive their encounters with certain monsters that have been after them, and trying to do something about it. And if not end what's happening, then at least get some proof so that they can convince the adults that something's actually happening here and get them on their side. And it becomes like kind of a one crazy night sort of thing with them trying to find evidence of these monsters and stop it, and how it relates to the local radio host and the local radio station.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I have read it, like I said, and I had a lot of fun with it. And you definitely deliver on your creepy monsters, sir. So it's
Thank you.
I envision I can't wait. I got to read the ARC copy, obviously, and there's a number of missing images still in there, and I'm like, oh, I need to see what these are going to look like. Yeah.
The
But
final book has like 26 illustrations, I think. So
awesome. It's gonna. I'm looking forward to seeing them, because there's a few I was like, oh. where he split the paragraph up, there's going to be a cool image in there. So
yeah, exactly. I'm hoping that my copy will actually arrive today, any minute. I'm waiting on my my final copies, and I'm really curious to see, and hopeful to see that the illustrations came out well in the final book. Fingers crossed on that.
What sort of how did you when you were writing, did you kind of have anything that was helpful in getting you going? Like if you were talking to a new writer, someone who's familiar with your stuff, and they're just like, man, I don't know where to begin. And as someone that was like, this is where I had to learn to begin. How did you get going? Like, how did you, start to find your feet?
Well, in this project specifically, I was lucky to have a really great agent who put together an amazing kind of pitch document, which really laid out a huge synopsis, went through all the characters. And she really helped me. Veronica Park was my agent at the time, and she helped me like really lay out a whole comprehensive document for this that I referred back to a lot, and that really helped as a foundational kind of starting point once it got approved and everything. But after that, the main thing I did was just go into Google Docs and make like a big bulleted list that's just like, here's chapter 1, what happens in chapter 1, here's chapter 2, all the way through until like I told myself the story, I guess, A to Z in however many chapters. And then, I went through and kind of refined that as best I can, that very basic list. So when I started actually first writing the very first page of the book, it was I already knew what I wanted to say in each chapter. And that was just immensely helpful. I can't recommend that enough. I know some people just like sit down and just write without that. And I cannot comprehend it at this point in time, but more power.
Yeah, I'm not there either, man. Like I can't do it. Like, but a friend of mine, a guy named Stephen McCraney, we read this. We were discussing this book on outlining, and it's the writer actually stops and says everybody is a discovery writer. Everybody. It's just some people do it through outlining, and some people do it through writing out all the work. Writing each scene. But I find it to just be so inefficient to. Like, I feel like I'm discovering a story as I'm outlining it, just as much as if I was doing anything else. It's just, I don't want to have wasted 2 hours writing out a scene that I'm going to eventually go, that's not working, and have to throw the whole thing out. I mean, that still happens sometimes anyway, but that's just the process of redrafting. But I'm definitely an outliner as well.
And I mean, and I wasn't even like that strict with the outline. Like if I felt like there's a bunch of stuff that were like big twists in that book that I was just like on the fly wrote in. I was like, that could be cool. And, it wasn't in the plan at all, but that plan was like the backbone, I guess, of the whole thing. And then the other thing I did was like, this is total like basics stuff, was I got a little egg timer from a convenience store, and I just used the egg timer to write for half an hour, and then when it rang, I took 15 minutes and didn't write, and then I did another half an hour, and I just did that all day. For like 2-3, I think it took like 3 months to write the manuscript, which was like way less time than I thought it was going to be. Because again, it's a subgenre that I know and love. I'm a big fan of like Summer of Night by Dan Simmons is an incredible kids versus monsters book. If you haven't read it, obviously I
need to finish it.
It's long, but it's quite good. But anyway, thankfully I was in an area that I was already comfortable with, even having not really written anything like this or anything at all like this before. But those two things, having a big backbone plan and just being really strict with a stupid egg timer, like training my brain to write and not look at Twitter.
No, that's not stupid at all. I literally have my Pomodoro timer in the tab over the side here, so it's that's not dumb at all. It's
vital.
I find that I often will just get to work and I'll forget to do that.
Yeah.
And it just it feels like time just kind of, I lose space of like how much time I've been spending on something. And
Yeah.
I'm a big I still work a full-time job. I still do all this stuff. And so trying to make sure I'm good with my time, time blocking is something I have to do a lot of, where it's like, okay, from like this time to this time, I'm doing this, and having that sort of egg timer thing helps make sure I'm getting stuff done.
I can't imagine like working a full-time job. Like, God, more power to you. That's
it's tough.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Jesus. When I worked full-time, I used to work at a bookstore. I worked retail like all my life until the last 3-4 years, I guess. And it's just you're exhausted. I don't imagine doing I can't imagine doing anything substantially creative after working a job. Like, that's superhuman.
Oh my gosh! Well, thank you. I've had a few people say that. It's
and with kids. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's becoming harder these days because my kids are getting to their teen years, and so just like life is just getting busier for them.
Of course.
And so I'm finding my energies a lot less, and so the book that I've been working on after the sleepover with Deepwater Creek has been pushed back like another year than I intended it to, because it was just I wasn't getting it done.
I remember the image you did for it was Deepwater Creek, right? Yes.
Yeah.
You posted the one image with the boat moving through the swamp and the big like cosmic horror monster. And I'm like, I'm hooked on it. So take as long as you want. I'll read it. If it's like that image, I'll be there when it eventually happens.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I would say one thing has changed. I'm worried. I had a friend on there who's real big about. He's like, you better not take that kaiju monster away from me. And I didn't take the giant kaiju away, but I did take away like what it looks like ultimately.
Okay.
And
that's a good design. I don't know.
I know it's well. What I was realizing is I wanted to make like a cosmic horror Jaws for kids. And so I had to basically say, well, this is a book that's got a lot of those scary things in it, but it's not a fishing book.
Yeah.
And it should be a fishing book. And so I've gone in and I've leaned much more into the idea that this is a fish. And so there's a lot of, it's more of a giant fish design. So
that's cool.
And I think it's sufficiently scary. I'll have to share with you in the private DMs a full image of it.
Do. Yeah, I would love to see that. I'd really, really love to see that. It's funny because I'm waiting to hear back from my pitch for the second book in this series. I don't know if we're calling it the Beacon Point series or whatever, but whatever, the follow-up to Scarewaves in the same town. And my elevator pitch for it is The Brood plus Nope plus Tremors for kids. And the whole book is structured around a big twist. Not even a twist, but just like the first half is making you think it's very much one thing in terms of genre, and then there's a big reveal that is you're completely fooled and it's something completely different in the grossest way possible. And I'm really excited for it, and I hope it gets approved. But it's also like my love letter to like the big like 80s monster movies, even more than like this. The first one was like very much internet creepypasta, like supernatural stuff, and there'll still be some of that because certain characters will come back. But this one is very much like 50s giant monster, kind of like big creature kind of thing. I'm really excited.
I had that same feeling watching Nope, where I was like, when that twist happens in the end, I just sat up and I was like, well, I'm in. Let's do this. Like, you realize it's like, oh gosh, we're watching Jaws, and I'm in.
Yeah, it's Sky Jaws. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so I'm really excited to see what you got up your sleeve there. Well, I think for your first outing, well done.
Thank you.
It's I'm really excited to see, and really excited to see how people react to it, and always happy just to have more kids horror. It's I do feel like there's sort of an interesting resurgence happening with kids horror that's been really fun to watch happen. I'm glad you're venturing into telling your stories, because your images evoke such stories, and it's time that we hear what you got in your mind. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I really want to, eventually I want to work myself up to it a little bit. To like, I have a YA comic story I want to eventually tell, a graphic novel idea I've had for a while, but I also really want to do like, short stories for adults and expound upon some of the creatures I've done in the past as well. I think it could be really cool.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to say. With all your art, where's the graphic novel? Like, I would love. I mean, it's also like, be careful what you wish for, because part of the reason these books take me so long is obviously the art is just like, oh, you know, so much.
The answer to that is two-part.